For most of human history, kings were not simply rulers. They were the law itself. Their words carried more weight than reason, more force than justice, and more permanence than truth. When a king spoke, entire nations listened, not because they agreed, but because disobedience meant punishment, exile, or death. And when power like that rests in the hands of a single human being, something strange begins to happen. Fear replaces logic. Ego replaces wisdom. And laws stop making sense. Across centuries and continents, kings created rules so bizarre, so absurd, that they sound like inventions. But they were real, enforced, and feared. These were not laws meant to protect people. They were laws meant to protect power. In ancient Persia, one king grew terrified of his own mortality. The idea of aging haunted him, and death became his greatest enemy. So he made a rule that no one in his presence was allowed to mention sickness, aging, or death. Not his servants. Not his advisors. Not even his physicians. Anyone who spoke of such things risked punishment. As the king grew older and weaker, everyone around him pretended he was immortal. Illness went untreated. Warnings went unspoken. Reality itself was silenced to preserve the illusion of eternal rule. In medieval Europe, another king believed laughter was dangerous. To him, laughter meant mockery, and mockery meant rebellion. He became convinced that a smiling subject was a disloyal one. So he ordered that laughing in public without royal permission was forbidden. Guards were instructed to watch faces instead of actions. A smile held too long could be questioned. A laugh at the wrong moment could lead to imprisonment. Slowly, joy disappeared from public life. Streets grew quiet, not because people were peaceful, but because they were afraid. In several kingdoms, clothing became a crime. Certain colors were declared royal property. Purple, gold, and crimson were reserved exclusively for the king and his family. If a commoner was caught wearing a forbidden color, it was considered an act of defiance. Punishments ranged from public humiliation to execution. A farmer wearing the wrong shade was no longer just poorly dressed. He was challenging authority. Fashion became a weapon, and clothing became a reminder of who mattered and who did not. One king, consumed by jealousy, issued a rule so extreme that it reshaped daily life. No man was allowed to look directly at the queen. Ever. Servants walked with their heads bowed. Guards turned their backs as she passed. Palace corridors were redesigned to avoid accidental eye contact. Even a brief glance, even by mistake, could result in severe punishment. The queen was elevated to royal status, yet stripped of normal human interaction. The law was not about protection. It was about ownership. Some kings obsessed over appearance. One ruler declared that all men in his kingdom must grow beards as a symbol of strength and loyalty. Those who could not were mocked, fined, or punished. Another king believed beards made men look savage and disobedient, so he banned them entirely. Men were forced to shave under threat of violence. Something as natural as facial hair became a political statement. Your own face was no longer yours. In one empire, a law was passed that no one could eat before the king finished his meal. No matter the time. No matter the hunger. Entire cities adjusted their daily routines around the king's appetite. If the king ate late, people waited. If he delayed, they starved. The message was clear. The king's comfort mattered more than the survival of his people. One emotionally cold ruler believed grief was weakness. When a royal family member died, he ordered that crying at funerals was forbidden. Mourners were required to stand silently. No tears. No sobs. Guards watched faces closely, ready to punish anyone who showed emotion. People learned to mourn in private, hiding their grief as if it were a crime. Even death was not allowed to challenge royal pride. Another king banned mirrors from his palace. He believed reflections encouraged vanity, and vanity led to rebellion. Polished metal was dulled. Reflective surfaces were removed. Even water basins were altered. The king feared what people might see, including himself. In trying to control appearances, he revealed his own insecurity. Marriage, too, was placed under royal control. In many feudal kingdoms, citizens were required to ask the king's permission to marry. Love was no longer private. It was political. Marriage affected land ownership, alliances, and taxation. Some couples waited years for approval. Others were denied without explanation. Families were torn apart, not by war, but by paperwork and power. One paranoid king believed commoners carried bad energy and disease. He ordered that no one was allowed to breathe directly toward him. Servants turned their heads while speaking. Advisors stood at angles. Some covered their mouths at all times. The king surrounded himself with people, yet lived in complete isolation, protected not by walls, but by fear. Language itself became dangerous under certain rulers. Some kings banned specific words. Words associated with rebellion. Words connected to former rulers. Words that reminded them of fear or weakness. Speaking the wrong word could be interpreted as treason. Conversations became cautious. Silence became safety. Even language was no longer free. One ruler went even further, believing dreams were signs of disloyalty. People who confessed to dreaming about rebellion could be punished. Fear entered the mind itself. Sleep was no longer an escape. When rulers tried to control dreams, freedom is already gone. Travel was another threat. Some kings believed that leaving the kingdom exposed people to dangerous ideas. So they banned travel without permission. Anyone caught leaving could be exiled or executed. Borders became cages. The world existed, but the people were not allowed to see it. Perhaps the strangest rule of all was also the most common. Many kings officially declared themselves incapable of being wrong. If a law failed, it was the people's fault. If crops failed, it was disobedience. If wars were lost, it was betrayal. Reality itself was rewritten to protect ego. Truth bent to preserve authority. These rules may sound ridiculous today. Some are laughable. Others are terrifying. But they reveal something deeper. Absolute power does not create wisdom. It amplifies insecurity. The weirdest rules were not born from intelligence or care. They were born from fear, paranoia, and the desperate need to control everything. History teaches us this lesson again and again. When rulers stop listening, laws stop making sense. And when power has no limits, even the simplest human actions can become crimes. Power creates laws. Fear creates madness. And when kings ruled without restraint, their rules became stranger than fiction.